So I want to talk a little bit more about like the protective monitoring loop or what's actually happening in the brain when we're getting into these phases so you can understand it a little bit better. And then I'll give you a couple of key tips you can just think through or have a list of so that when you find yourself in the moment, you have a little bit of structure to fall back onto to kind of work your way out of it and help rebuild that pattern in a better way.
Many of the women that come to work with us are doing everything right. They're putting in all the effort, yet they're left feeling frustrated because their hip pain won't fully resolve. Or maybe even feeling like there's a missing piece that hasn't been fully identified. So, the video you're about to watch is an actual coaching call from inside our program where we discuss neuroplasticity and how the brain may be playing a bigger role in recovery than many of us realize. While this is likely not the entire answer, it's often one of the most overlooked pieces. If you want to learn a little bit more, I've included a free training in the description below. Let's jump in.
I want to coach a little bit in more depth with some of the things we've been talking about the last few weeks on this call, but also a couple of themes that have been coming up for a number of ladies currently, but also just in general with the journey of overcoming chronic hip pain and all that entails. And let me know if any of you can relate to this, but at the beginning, obviously, we're learning more about your body and we're trying to figure out what types of sensations are you feeling? What types of symptoms are you having? What are the little connections we can put together? What does it all mean? And so we're having you track things a little bit more focused in the sense of trying to have that awareness within your body. And that's very helpful for us at the beginning. However, as we start to learn more about your body, as you start to have more awareness about your body, we're peeling away different layers and we're learning more about how much of this is musculoskeletal with strength or weakness or movement patterns or things like that. How much of this is pelvic floor and those deeper stabilizing or foundational muscles of support, of letting go, just connection within our body. And then how much of this is wired in the patterns of the brain, of the thoughts, of the fears, of the anticipations, of the timeline of how long the body has been going through things. And so as we start to shift a little bit further into the healing journey, the focus becomes more on neuroplasticity, which is, so neuroplasticity, as a reminder, for those of you that aren't familiar, is learned patterns. So we all have learned patterns. We all come into this with learned patterns. And as we're trying to heal the body and overcome or break through stubborn symptoms, we have to create new patterns. Okay. But we can't create those new patterns until we have more of the front end details. And so when we're getting into more of those middle or progressed phases, whether it's a few weeks in, a few months in, a few years in, like our timelines can be different for so many different reasons. But we have to actually shift the brain's involvement in what we're thinking, how we're feeling, how we're responding, and the vigilance or the hyper awareness of what we have with symptoms. And so what we've been hearing or working on with women for years and years, it's like once you start to get a handle on the body or like how weak you are or how much, exercise you're doing or how to put the pieces of the puzzle together, it's like you'll have wins, you'll feel stronger, you'll feel like you're making mini progress, but then you'll have a setback or you'll be like at the top of the mountain and then you'll feel like you fall down it, right? It's like, well, I'm feeling so great. I feel like I've got this. I have hope. I'm excited. And then we crash. Like, oh my gosh, now my pain's back. Oh my gosh, is this ever going to go away? Oh my gosh, what am I missing? What does this symptom mean? What am I feeling? So it becomes more of like we get excited, but it's fleeting because our brain doesn't yet fully trust it and believe it. There's still a little disconnect there. And so I want to, first of all, normalize this because this is very, very common for any of us, for some people more so than others. But this is an important piece stemming from some of what we talked about yesterday or last week with goal setting. What does that look like? How does that change? And also the roller coaster of what this journey is like. Okay, because I don't want, I essentially want to make sure you feel safe to learn how to live during this healing journey process and not like This is a healing phase or a rehab phase, and it's separate from you living your life. Okay. Um, is this resonating thus far for anybody? Yes. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit more about like the protective monitoring loop, or what's actually happening in the brain when we're getting into these phases, so you can understand it a little bit better. And then I'll give you a couple of key tips you can just think through or have a list of, so that when you find yourself in the moment, you have a little bit of structure to fall back onto to kind of work your way out of it and help rebuild that pattern in a better way. Okay. So first of all, understanding that the brain is wired for liking familiarity and certainty. And so when we've been in symptoms of whatever sort for so long, that is familiar. Even though we don't like it, even though it physically feels uncomfortable, it's familiar for the brain. Okay. And so when we have enough time with those types of symptoms, or the unpredictability of how they might occur. So like if we're like, oh, we're feeling great, and then randomly we go on a walk or we go on a run and something flares up, that's like a frustration. Or even the anticipation of something that's a very predictable trigger, like Kathy's case, sitting. It triggers me. That's frustrating. I know it's going to happen. So the brain is anticipating it because it knows it comes. So this is our brain just trying to work us into a sense of protection. And it almost can make us feel, even as we're getting stronger, even as we're having proof of like movements getting better, or we're progressing exercises, it's still almost like a mindset of my body's a little fragile, or I can't fully feel connected, or I can't fully trust this, because if I stop paying attention, then something's going to fall to the wayside. Like something else is going to happen. I need to constantly be monitoring my symptoms. I need to constantly be thinking about, okay, is my pelvic floor connected? Am I breathing here? Does my foot feel stable? Right? It's like the things we try to teach you so you have the awareness are now taking over, and it's like all your brain is thinking about. We can't stop thinking about it, because if we stop thinking about it, what if we miss something? What if we miss a key detail, and that feeds us into a huge flare up? So this is what's going on in the brain as we're trying to go through this phase of like, wow, okay, so I'm feeling different. I am feeling connected. There's a little bit of proof that I'm moving better, or that things are reducing, but the brain is still on guard for what it's been wired to do for so long. It's still in that fear-based protection mechanism. And so when you get to that point where you're starting to recognize, okay, the brain is actually taking over a little bit more than I need it to, it's no longer serving me because now I'm just hyper focused on everything. It's almost like we want to calm the vigilance down, or the hypervigilance down. And if you think about like the doing of the rehab, so the doing the exercises, the thinking about the symptoms, the figuring out how to respond, like if we could categorize those into like a doing sensation or state, that is the act of the brain being on guard and being ready to respond by what it's learned in the past. So if we could flip that a little bit and figure out, okay, how can I be through this situation? What does it look like if I'm not actually doing? How can I get comfortable being uncomfortable? It's a little uncomfortable at first because, again, there's a little bit of newness or uncertainty, a little bit of fear, which is normal, but all these things that the brain doesn't like. But in order for that uncertainty to become certain again, that unfamiliarity to become familiar, we have to be in it. We have to allow our body, our brain, the time, the experience, the exposure. We have to be able to ride that wave in a sense of being, so that we have the opportunity to reflect or respond in a different way, as opposed to more of that the typical go-to, like, okay, this hurts. I need to keep thinking about it so it doesn't go to my knee or to my other hip, or I need to do this right away so that doesn't continue happening. Yes, there is a time and place for doing certain tools, but it's also an act of teaching the brain how to get comfortable in that uncertainty, so that we have the opportunity for that uncertainty to become more certain. Because as we talked about earlier, The brain likes certainty. And so if it hasn't experienced it before, the natural response is to figure out what to do or how to respond or where to go into protection mode. But that is going to keep us stuck, and that's going to prevent that full resilience from being built. And that's what we're trying to achieve in the grand scheme of this healing journey. Okay. Is this making sense thus far? Okay. So for a lot of us, part of this is going to come, like, I guess our identity or our like personal characteristics are going to come into play, and they can hold us back or they can propel us forward. Right. So a lot of us are very high achieving. We're very organized. We're the go-getters. We're the doers. We'll check the list. We're great patients. Right. We give you an exercise plan. You guys are going to do it. Every single one of you on this call, you guys do your exercises. We don't have to worry about that. So our identity is, okay, I'm going to follow the rules. I'm going to think about the symptoms. I'm going to manage the symptoms. I'm going to do the exercises. I'm going to be careful here. I'm going to figure out this, or I'm going to put these pieces together. So part of that is good, right? A lot of that is helpful. Now we get to have the conversation of, okay, where is that holding you back though? And so if we're getting into these phases or these mindsets of like, oh, I feel great and then I crash, or I feel safe in a little container or with a few exercises, but as soon as I try to do more or think bigger, I get frustrated, or I lose motivation, or I feel like I'm not making progress, or we go through all those emotional roller coasters. That's where it's like, okay, how can I now look at this as an opportunity of what this is allowing me to learn how to do in a different way? What opportunity of uncertainty is this bringing to me? What opportunity of discomfort is this bringing to me, so that we can start to transition into more of that being, the reflective, the responsive, the allow the feeling to happen, but then change how we're logically thinking about it before we make that next response. Okay. When we first have pain or triggers or things like that, we all know this. We've talked about this before. Like, first time we stub our toe, our brain, like our logical brain's like, oh my gosh, don't walk so close to the wall. That hurt. That's a good thing, right? We need that. But when we've had symptoms over and over and over again, our brain's like, oh, we remember this. We know what to do. Here's how we're going to respond. And so it's processed differently in the brain. And so for us to get into that actual neuroplasticity of rewiring, we have to take our current triggers, our current symptoms, the familiarity of what they are, and we have to bring them back into that logical state so that we're thinking about them differently. We're reflecting or responding differently. And then we're allowing that over and over and over again to replace that prior learned pattern. And it's much easier to do this when it's positive. It's much more important to do this though when it's like a negative occurrence or a negative emotion. Okay. I think there's like a 2-to-1 ratio or like a 3-to-1 ratio of negative versus positive neurons in our brain, purely from an evolutionary standpoint, to protect us. Okay. So that means we have to work twice as hard to find the good, to find the wins, to find the opportunity, to find all of the forward progress pieces to replace what we're conditioned to feel with the frustration, the failures, the setbacks, just all of those types of emotions that are so common in this journey. Okay. But if we can understand the science behind it a little bit of like what our brain is actually responding or needing to do in order to change the pattern, that allows us to then not only be more mindful of it, but to feel like, okay, this is making more sense. And it's actually creating a little bit more clarity and certainty in my brain, even if I don't fully feel the end results. You now have a little bit more information or knowledge for the brain to keep thinking about the next time you're in this type of phase, so that it doesn't derail you or bring you back to old patterns. It's now like, oh, okay, I've heard this before, or I remember talking about this, or, oh, this is literally what's happening because this is science and this is how the brain functions. Okay, here's how I'm going to use this now to guide my next decision or my next action or my next thought. Okay. So the overall, I guess, goal as we're getting into more of the resilience building, more of the rewiring, less of the awareness, less of the connecting the dots, is we actually want to get out of constant assessing mode. Okay. So the first piece of that, just have the awareness, I'm doing this again. Okay. Instead of how does my hip feel? Am I okay? Is this working? Am I stronger yet? Am I doing this correctly? Is this good? Is this bad? Like, whoo, take a back seat to all those questions. You're like, brain, I am tired of thinking about this right now. Because then your brain is just keep giving that attention and you don't want the attention there anymore. It's no longer serving you for where you're trying to go. So instead, it's like, how can we think about the being instead of the doing? If that's a helpful like term for you guys or state for you guys to think about being in. Um, but or just ask yourself a different question, right? Instead of like, am I safe or is this bad or is this helping? It's like, what support do I need to give my body? What is it asking of me? Right? Or curiosity with the symptom. What is this symptom telling me? Maybe I need to spend 2 breaths breathing into my pelvic floor because I just came out of a stressful meeting. And that's the body's way of communicating it to you. Right? Or how can I respond to this? How can I move with confidence as opposed to, okay, I have to adjust my movement to do this to prevent this, right? So it's taking more of that empowering, proactive, here's where I want to be, how do I get there type of conversation with the brain, because then that's going to evoke a little bit more almost like critical thinking for a minute, and then it's going to force your thoughts to be different. Okay. And this, again, coming back to last week's conversation where I can't remember who it was, but I asked somebody about like, do you truly believe you, Miss Sarah, maybe it was you. I was like, do you actually believe you can be healthy and strong with this or this? And our thoughts are what create our beliefs. Okay. We get to control our thoughts. So therefore, we get to create our beliefs. And if you truly don't believe you can heal, those thoughts are going to keep you stuck. If we're looking for all the reasons why this isn't working, or I'm not there yet, or I'm not strong enough, you're going to stay there because you cannot physically out exercise that piece. But if you believe, even with just a glimmer of hope, I can be better, I can get stronger, I can live a pain free life, I can go run a mile or lift 500 pounds, whatever it may be, and you keep thinking along those lines, even on the hard days, that will become easier and easier for your brain. That will become more familiar for your brain. That will create a sense of certainty for your brain. Okay. It's harder at the beginning. It gets easier as you do it more often. But you are likely, if you haven't already, you are likely going to hear us talk about this often because this is so important and this can show up in so many different ways. The thoughts you think over and over and over again become the beliefs your brain believes. Change your thoughts, change your experience. Literally change your thoughts, you will change your life. And the beauty is we get to control our thoughts. So easier said than done, but at a high level, that's obviously the little takeaway or the goal. Because some of you are still dealing with symptoms or setbacks or challenges, I do want to give you a couple of maybe like little steps to think through when you're in like a challenging situation and you want to try to practice this in real life. But I also encourage you, ladies, that are doing very well or that are feeling optimistic or hopeful or crushing it. Amazing. Keep challenging yourself with these thoughts. Keep up leveling your goals or your vision for where you want your body to be. Because more importantly than just how we physically feel, it's how we genuinely show up in this world as humans. Okay. And at the beginning of this conversation, I said, the goal here is I want to teach you all how to feel like you're living every step of the way throughout this journey, even if it's not the most fun or the most easy because you're in pain or setbacks. I still want you to feel like you're living life. Okay. And maybe a little thought or a question for you guys to reflect on later is like, do I actually believe that I can live or enjoy life? Or what does that even mean to me right now as I'm in the thick of things? If I'm so tied up to what I can't do or what has been taken away or what I have to modify around, What do I have left? Right? What else can bring me joy or make me fulfilled or make me feel connected to myself? Because if it's hard to answer those questions, I highly recommend like setting aside time to either think through or journal through those types of questions because they can be very, very helpful from the mindset piece of what we're talking about today. Okay. Um, but let me go through just a couple tips for you to think through next time you guys are in a hard day or a flare up or whatnot. Um, the first one, think about, again, easier said than done, but try not to like compulsively be checking your symptoms. Okay. I'm not saying eliminate awareness or don't think of anything, but try not to let it like guide you or lead you. Okay. Think about like if I was going to go on a walk or if I was going to go do my workout or go on a drive or whatever else, something you have coming up. I want you to think about how can I let myself go enjoy this walk without constantly like scanning my hip or thinking how my back is rotating or think of how I'm physically feeling. Like, how can I truly be present? How can I go on this walk, enjoy the birds or the trees or whatever it may be, so that you're taking yourself out of like constant, oh, what am I feeling? What am I going to feel? And monitoring symptoms and more about being present, doing living, right? Being out there. So this can be big or small, but it's like, how can I just let myself complete this next hour of work fully immersed in whatever it is I need to do without worrying about how I physically feel. Okay. The second one, and again, this one is probably one you've heard us talk about often. If you haven't, this is an important one. Record the evidence you have of all of the capability, like the progress you've had or the strength improvements you've had, big or small, right? Licia mentioned being able to breathe into her pelvis. That is such a huge sign of progress. So write that down. Think about that. Tell yourself that. Remind your brain that all the things you can do or all the little signs of improvement you have achieved when you are feeling like you're struggling, because the brain needs that proof. And the more proof it gets, the more clear and certain it becomes. And as we have talked about many times, the brain likes certainty. Okay. What could you not do a few months ago or a few weeks ago? Right. Tessa, you slept through the night. Amazing. Remind your brain that every night before you go to bed. I know I can do this. I have proof I've done this. That's huge. The brain needs that proof and it needs to remember that proof over and over again so that it becomes easier and easier. Okay. But even little subtle things, right? Was I less sore? Did I recover faster? Was it easier for me to connect my foot to my hip in this movement, right? The little things, they all count. Okay. So those could all be examples of you just having proof of the progress of your body. And then I really challenge you guys and encourage you guys to figure out for this third step how to feel like you're living while you're healing. What does that look like? What does that feel like? What is it like to go row on the water for a few miles or a few hours and not even think about my body? Just thinking about the strokes, thinking about the water, hearing the waves. Like, what is it like to just live? Right? To go out, laugh with girlfriends, go on a hike, do something, just where you're fully present and living. Even if it's not that end goal of where you physically want to be, you're living it. Okay. That counts. That's part of this journey. That's part of the rewiring. That's an important tip to make sure you're scheduling in regularly. Okay. And then the last little tip I'll give is just, again, zooming out. So it's only going to be natural. You're going to feel something and the brain's going to go like, oh my gosh, here's my hip again, or here's the pelvic floor, or here's that nagging shoulder, or whatever it may be. So that's going to happen. But here's where you get to take control of the thoughts and how you respond, right? Zoom out a little bit. You start to hone in on a certain area, zoom out. Like, what else is going around you? What else is going on around you? Like conversations, noises, the smells you're hearing, the things you're seeing, right? You can tap into those five senses just so you start to like broaden your experience in a different way that removes it from just what you're physically feeling. Okay. Um, so being able to zoom out and then become present again, right? Like, oh, I'm on this walk. Okay, my hip was acting up a little bit. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I know I'm safe. Nobody's going to run and take my legs out from underneath me. I know I can continue walking. I've walked all day long. Why is walking around the block any different? It's not, right? So you're just zooming out and creating this sense of safety with your thoughts so that eventually that is in the automatic go-to for your brain, and then your body is going to feel safe. This is how we get the brain and the body to start to speak the same language, feel safe, feel strong, feel connected, feel that sense of trust, which is so crucial for the longevity of staying well and not having this cycle of symptoms or flare ups for years and years and years. This work right here, this is what sets this apart from most everything else many of you have tried. And so sometimes I'll be sweet and I'll try to, be nice about everything. Sometimes I'm going to be straightforward and I'm going to give it to you with love, but with like a sense of we have to do this. We get to do this. This is a huge piece if we want our future to be different. Okay. You guys are all capable of this. You guys have all felt versions of this. We can do this. You are doing this. Let's keep doing this.